Welcome to episode 805 of Salsido Paranormal. I'm your host, James Salsido, here tonight with my co host, Jen, the Arcane Observer. And tonight we'll be talking about black eyed children and people. As always, you can find all episodes of the show along with links to social media, ways to listen, and ways to support the show, including the Patreon page, which has extra shows, as well as the merchandise store. You can find all that over at the website, which is salsidoparanormal.com. That's SALSIDO paranormal.com. And support is never expected, but always appreciated, as there are expenses in making these shows. One of those expenses that will be eventually coming up here is getting a new computer, because apparently Windows 10 is going to be not supported later on this year. And so yeah, there are expenses, but like I said, I'm working on saving up for that as well. So yeah, this is something that came up a while ago. I forget where it actually first came up. I saw or read or heard something about it somewhere, some show, probably. And it's something I've always heard about here and there. People having experiences with these. Mostly, it seems like it's children that have just completely blacked out eyes, and apparently they seem to have possibly some abilities to affect the mind of the individual and control it, maybe. So we'll get into all that, but yeah. So this should be a good topic to get into, and I put the articles that I'll be talking about in the show notes and sources Discord channel here on my server. And if y'all want to check those out, they're good sources, but just be aware that the images are creepy. All the images in those articles are creepy. So if you don't want to be creeped out, then you may not want to. But yeah. So anyway, with that, we can get to the show here. Thank you all for being here, and welcome to the show again, Jen. Thank you for being here as well.
Hey, yeah, I'm glad to be here. Talking about black-eyed children. This is an old urban legend. It's been around for, well, I guess not old, but it's been around for a long time. I remember when I was first hearing about it, the reports. Do you remember who broke the whole black-eyed children phenomenon? Who was talking about it?
I think it was, and it has it in these articles here.
Yeah.
I think it's
Well, then we'll get to it then, I guess. But
yeah,
it was just
Brian
so,
Beth.
yes, that is
Yep.
what it was. And I remember it was just the strangest thing. I would hear about people having these accounts. It just kind of started all at once. It seemed like just a phenomenon that just suddenly came out of nowhere. And even though you can relate it to other past stories of similar things, which a lot of people think that it is kind of just a rebirth of many of those old stories, it's just, I don't know. It's like they're, so many different accounts of, are they vampires, or what would happen if you let them into the house? I guess we should get to some of the articles that kind of describe some of the stories for people who maybe haven't heard of it or something.
Yeah, yep. We have a few here, and we'll get
Okay.
to those. And it seems I haven't really found anything in any accounts of them being positive experiences. This is one of those rare cases where so many other things we talk about, like shadow figures or ghosts or whatever, aliens, whatever. There's a whole mix. There's a range where some seem to be neutral, some seem to be good, some seem to be not so good. So far, from what I've read and heard, there's not very many, if at all, cases of these black-eyed beings having good intentions. So this is one of those rare things, but it's important, even though I do cover more of the neutral to positive experiences on the show. It's always important, I think, to here and there always go over the negative side of things as well. And I mean, even with the negative side of things, I think so much of what's out there that is thought of as negative, that's based on just fear of the unknown, and so it may not always have negative intentions. It just seems that way because of we don't know what they are or who they are, or why they're here. So I think those are details to keep in mind. But hello everyone in the chat there. Thank you for being here. So we will get to this first article here. It's from Let me see here. It's from atlasobscura.com. They have a lot of good articles and a lot of things. And so the first, so this article, the title is "Death as a Child: The Modern Legend of the Black-Eyed Children," and it has subtitle here: "First described in Texas in the mid-90s. What are these disturbing figures, and what do they want?" So, and again, with all these articles here, there's just all the images are creepy. So, these black-eyed children is what they're most commonly known. It's mostly children, but there are some accounts of adult beings with black eyes as well. They were first as far as the local, or not local, as far as the more recent legends go, or experience accounts go. This started in the mid '90s with, like I said in the beginning here, Brian Bethel. At least that's where a lot of people consider this to be the start of that. He was paying his cable bill, I believe it was, at least according to the article here, some kind of bill. This was back before you could just pay everything online. So you had to make checks out and take them places and drop them off, or put them in the mail. But so he was in his vehicle. He was in Abilene, Texas, and he had just finished a late shift of work at the local newspaper. And he was in his car inside outside a strip mall parking lot there. And he was writing a check for a bill. And suddenly, it says in the article here, the hair on the back of his neck stood up, and he noticed a group of teenagers standing by his car. And the teens asked for a ride to their mom's house to get money for tickets for a movie. They wanted to catch a late night showing at the theater, at the mall's movie theater. But this was odd to Brian because the movie they wanted to see had already started 45 minutes earlier, and the teenagers sounded much older than they appeared to be. So after that, he was not sure what he wanted to do. In the parking lot, the dim lights of the parking lot there, he saw that all these teenagers, these children, their eyes were black. And they asked him a couple of times, this is going from memory here, they asked him a couple of times to let him into the car, or let them into the car, and to give them a ride home. And he had this fear, and he almost started to roll down a window in the car, I believe, or open a door. And it was like he was being controlled. This is also, again, based from memory here, because I've heard about this in other shows over the years. And he snapped out of it and put the car into reverse and sped off. And when he looked back, the children were not there anymore. They were gone. So you have this vanishing aspect to them as well. Article here says that Bethel wrote about this later on for the Abilene News Reporter. And ever since then, stories about these similar figures have come up in several countries. Now, that's amazing. You're not just talking about here in the U.S. Some details have changed from one account to another, but there are people that have looked into these things, says scholars and urban legend enthusiasts. They agree that these figures are an example of. Now, I hadn't heard about this, but death personified as a child. Now, I never really heard that description necessarily of them. It was always just no one knew what they were. But these, it says in the article here, these beings, it calls them creatures, which I guess if they're not regular human, then maybe you could call them that, but I don't know. But it's the what do you call it? The odd thing about this here is with these children, the usual idea about children is that they are inherently good. they're innocent. We talked about a bit about that last week, actually. Um, and so the natural reaction for people, a lot of people, is to want to help them. And so it seems like these, whoever these are, they try um, to use that to their advantage, or I guess you could say they use that intentionally to make the whole experience even worse for people. I guess you could say that either way. And so now what I've heard from different shows over the years too is that when people do let them in to their homes or whatever, there's terrible things that happen to them, to the people. They just, their lives take negative turns. They become unlucky, and all these kinds of things. So this is the whole. Basically, that's the summary of the whole original experience there. But then also, what happens in has happened in other accounts, because these accounts that keep on coming over time. I don't find a ton of them, but every once in a while I'll see one, as I'm looking for true stories to share on the shows, and I don't always share them because they're so often they're frightening. They're perceived of as being negative, but so they still happen apparently, to people here and there. So and there's also the factor of sometimes these children wear either outdated clothes, or they'll wear brand new clothes. So there's this whole issue with that as well. They speak in a monotone voice more, and it says more mature than expected for their apparent age. They often repeat the same things when they're asking to be let in, and they often there's this seems like there's this mental influence. The longer the person looks at their eyes, to get them to get people to react to let them in, and so, and in the cases where they approach houses, they'll ask to use the phone to make a phone call, as in the original case there with Bethel, or to use the bathroom in the home, or in some cases to get a ride to places. So, but yeah, what's your thoughts on all that so far, Jen?
Yeah, those are the stories I remember hearing about, and there were several other ones too that just kind of here and there. And just the idea, like the timeline of 1996 or 1998, or the accounts being around the 90s. There's something, I don't know, I don't, there's so much strangeness about the shift in society and everything. Just all of the, I guess you would call it the culture of the late 80s and the 90s, and then up into the early 2000s, just these huge shifts in the culture in the West, and I guess around the world, quite a dramatic shift. But the idea of, why suddenly this fear, the personification as children is so messed up. I mean, I think that it's that whole, I mean, we've seen like in particular movies that's really taken off. But I don't know if it, the whole idea about death personified or something in the shape of a child, that's just, I think it's something that sounds like it would come out of that era, or there's like almost like society. It reminds me of what was that one movie? It was or not a movie, it was a book initially, Arthur C. Clarke, Childhood's End, I think, or something like that, where the whole concept of in the end, well, in the initial story, that there's like this arrival of some kind of alien creatures, and at first they're really helpful to society, and then as time goes on, like these children start being born that have these sort of psychic abilities and things like that, and that in the end the children are like sort of gathered up, and they just sort of, what would you call it, like ascend in a way, and the earth is destroyed, and those are the ones that survive. It was a science fiction story, but it kind of makes me think about, during that time there was a lot of stuff coming out also about, like, there was the, well, they had like star children or something, and they had the rainbow or crystal like all these different conversations were going on in that whole arena of fringe topics about people being born in a certain time that would be able to that would be ushering in these different, I guess, stages of some sort of massive shift in the consciousness of humanity on the planet. And I wonder if, the connection of just the way that people are thinking about everything in their world, and if the black-eyed children phenomenon is almost like a sort of reflection of that, to have that sort of cryptid idea. Maybe it means the death of a previous way of doing things, or like a different world. Because, of course, if a child shows up at your door and wants to use the phone or wants to come in, there would be no question about letting them in, or helping them in some way. So even just planting that kind of doubt in people's minds, it's just this odd shift in the way that we perceive um, reality. And as far as like that people would be looking at that. And there was a whole thing during the COVID era too, that there was sort of this really slim like conversation going on about the children that were being born during that time, that there was something strange going on there, that there was something about that era that was causing, this generation to come in that was different than all the rest. And then just generationally thinking about the conversations about, Gen X and Gen Z and the millennials, and then right now they have like Generation Alpha and Generation Beta, and just all these different ways that they see the different eras of people being born into those times. And if you think about with the 90s, I don't know, that he maybe even, I mean, I don't know. And then to have a great deal of bad luck or something to happen afterwards. I mean, how grounded are those accounts? And I don't know. I just think that, but the classic idea of a cryptid appearing as something like there's the babies crying around the water bridges. And of course, anybody should go and make sure that nothing is going on, but it's a classic trope. Or the weeping woman in the woods, or like this sort of thing, or like calls, mimic voices and all of that sort of phenomenon. Just this whole strange corner of horror sort of creeping up in this more modern era of conversations about these sorts of fringe, scary sort of topics. The classic vampire mythos. It's like you took it, like with Black-Eyed Children, it's like the classic vampire trope of wanting to come inside or to come wherever. It's obviously not about actually entering into the house or into the car, but somehow being allowed into the psyche of the person or something is what it seems like, you know.
Yeah. And yeah, there's when I've heard people suggest that they're vampires. I've heard aliens, all different things. And the vampire thing is a possibility in a way, if you go by the fact that so often, these beings are asking to be invited to be let in, or to be allowed access to the person. And I've heard that's something that, according to some lore, vampires. I mean, that was used in Stephen King used that in Salem's Lot, where the vampires in that novel, they couldn't come into a person's place unless they were invited, and they would ask, and once the person said yes, which they would usually be under some kind of mind control, hypnosis kind of thing, that once they said yes, then so there's an odd thing going on there where they have to be invited in, but also they're manipulating the person to do that.
Hmm.
So I think that is also odd, the way that they can't do anything directly, but they can influence others to let them do what they want to do as well.
Yeah. Yeah, there's as far as like with the movies and things like that, there was that, what was it? Is it Salem's Lot? I thought it was called something else, but there's like all these the children of this town. Do you remember this? And they all like have kind of glowing eyes, and it's black and white film. Um,
No, I don't remember that one so much. I don't know if it was Salem's Lot. Salem's Lot had, as far as the novel goes, it was just everybody in a town like slowly
it
started
was
being
Village of the Damned. So,
okay.
okay, so yeah, and then there was, you have Children of the Corn that came out in the 70s, I think. So like all this concept about children sort of taking on a different kind of power, I think, was something going on with society that they were seeing or afraid of, what might happen with those coming generations or what they might do or how. So there was a fear about it because there was something, maybe there was something kind of powerful about it or something that they were starting to notice that was, just sort of out of their realm of what they were accustomed to how children would or should behave. So there was like a huge shift in that, I think, in the psychology of like adults versus the children. There's like this weird, and that became a trope,
Oh yeah.
almost. So like the whole concept is really bizarre. But then just recently, there was a video I posted in Mike's thread. I came across it was all these short clips kind of put together, and it was of children that would react like little bitty little children, like toddlers and below that. So toddlers and under having extreme reactions to people calling on the Google Home app. Like they would have these, you'd have to watch the
Mm.
clip to understand kind of what I'm getting at. But, and then people were really, I got kind of freaked out about it. I was like, that is so strange. Why are they reacting that way? I mean, you conceive of the idea that maybe there's some sort of summoning of a spirit when you call Google, or that maybe that house has something like that. It's just really bizarre. But then someone had posted a link after that about this new movie coming out called Weapons. And I suppose I saw the trailer, and I recommend everybody kind of, if you want a scary movie, maybe for summer, I think it's coming out in August. But it's sort of about all these kids disappear, and there's a strange thing surrounding it, and there's something to do with aliens. And anyway, it's just this common trope that keeps coming up. But it seems to be a fear of the younger generations coming up, or that children are taking on in these accounts a connotation that frightens the older generations, you know, to such an
Yeah.
extreme. And it's really interesting, I think.
That is something that was actually, it's funny how this keeps coming back to Salem's Lot. That was part of the concept in that book. And I also, funny enough, Children of the Corn, that movie came out in 1984. So here you have this generation, this couple decades, 80s, 90s, even with Salem's Lot, I believe it took place in the late 70s in the novel. So you have this whole, yeah, that's a whole topic, I guess, in and of itself. But this whole distrust of the younger generation, and in that novel, some kids were turned into vampires by by basically the first child that was turned into a vampire in that town. Later went around and did the same to their friends in school. So quite dark there. It's such a good novel, just not even because of the vampire thing necessarily, but because of the characters are just done so well. That usually is the case with Stephen King, but yeah. So yeah, Children of the Corn came out in '84, um, and so there's this other article here I found, um, and it's called, the title is "The Black-Eyed People," and this is from a website called godsandmonsters.com. There's a dash in between each one of the words there. And so this article talks about modern mythology having a lot of unexplained phenomenon, but there's nothing as unexplainable, according to the article here, as black-eyed people. They're often called black-eyed kids, or black-eyed beings, but there's also people as well, adults. Says that most accounts of encounters follow a lot of the same patterns. There's slight changes in each one, but a lot of so in a lot of cases, there's a human-looking being with pure black eyes, including the normal white part of the eye, that will approach a person either at their home or in the car, asking to be let in. And they usually have a very dry personality, which I've heard about a lot. Almost no personality at all. But unless they're the only thing that they do have, the sort of emotion that they seem to have, the further on we go, the more they have to ask to be let in. They do seem to become angry over time. And if they're and unless they're told to be told that the person will let them in, that's when they get agitated. So most people describe a feeling of immense dread and fear when in the presence of these beings, but they can't say exactly why. Well, if you're looking at someone that's telling you they want to get in and they have black eyes, which is not normal, I can understand that. But also, I do think that beings can cause that sense of fear, that feeling of fear as well. It can come from the person, but I think it can also come or be caused by whatever they're encountering. They usually have very pale or sickly looking skin. Also, now I hadn't heard about I guess I hadn't thought about this, but they usually have very dark hair. I'm trying to think of how many accounts I've heard of them. Now, I don't know why this matters, but I'm trying to think of, and I never really have heard of any accounts that I can think of black-eyed children that have brighter colored hair. It's always dark, from what I can think of. They often wear black or very dark clothes, and but again, sometimes this article mentions that sometimes, in rare cases, people have been approached by these black-eyed people in public. One person, according to this article here, says they came across a female black-eyed being in a gas station restroom who just stood there and stared at her. So that's not creepy at all. And I did look up. We'll save this for the end. I looked up on Reddit, which is where I go for all my true stories. The terms black-eyed children, I believe I put in there, and so we'll save some of those accounts for the end here. But yeah, so this is odd, and I don't know what they are, but there's these articles here you can check out as well, and let's see here. So I'm looking at this article here. It says there's a few things that the person that wrote it has sort of figured out based on everything they read. So this is something we talked about already. Black-eyed people must get permission to enter a home or a car. So they can't come in without invitation, but of course they can influence people that try to get them to do that. Next point here in this list here, in a couple of cases, there was the person encountering the black-eyed person drove away in their car. Now I have heard of this, only to see the same person, the same black-eyed figure, on the street 2 or 3 times on the way home. And this is at different points along different roads, to where there's no way that the person, the black-eyed being, could have physically walked from one place to another in the amount of time it took the driver to drive to those locations. So that's the second point here. Number 3, it says that according to this article here, there was one sighting of a black-eyed figure in an elevator. Now, they don't give a source for this, but I'm just curious. But there was when the man riding the elevator with him watched the tapes back, he appeared to be alone in the elevator, even though. So let me read this again. One of the black-eyed children was caught on security tapes in an elevator. When the man riding the elevator with him watched the tapes back, he appeared alone in the elevator, no black-eyed person. So that's odd. 4, there's almost in almost every story about an encounter, there's it ends with the person feeling great fear and getting away from this figure. In a couple of stories, people have had very intense instinctive reactions, telling them not to let the being know that they were being affected, that the person was being affected by this being. Sort of the idea that if they showed potential weakness or their feelings, that might cause the being to act more boldly. Says that people that have spoken to the black-eyed beings say these beings have often made references to not having a home. They seem to be wandering around looking for something. So that's odd. The writer here says that they have an eerie feeling, and this is just according to this article here, that the home that they're speaking of isn't a house; it's a body to live in. So, of course, that could be. I haven't heard that before, but so that's one person's thoughts there. Possible, I don't know. The article here says they only know of one case where someone actually did let one of these black-eyed beings in, and it was the first time they'd heard about them. And so apparently this person has experiences with a certain black-eyed person. Okay, so this is unusual, that where it's not a negative encounter. So I guess maybe in rare cases, it does have a link there, so you can check out more details on that. So, but yeah, so that's basically that article there. But yeah, this is an odd topic for sure.
It is
So
super odd. I
yeah,
think that I really do feel though, like I remember hearing accounts about the whole idea of course, okay, talking about kind of like folklore and things like that. That the accounts it's really strange. As far as taking a perspective of a different sort of that they I don't know, like a cycle of humanity at some point that or an era in time where there was like these clashing groups essentially. But oh wow, it's 4th of July, so there's a lot of fireworks. But um,
yeah,
it's not 4th of July, but it's building up, so there's a lot of fireworks going around here in my neighborhood. But I think the trope basically of being afraid of children, see, like a lot of the stories that I read when I was doing a lot of research on folklore and things like that, were that, these certain sort of, I guess you would call them like what people would have called uncivilized groups and sort of barbarian groups, but their children would wander around in the forests in these kind of like I guess you would call them like a band of these sort of like wild children in the forests, and they were so adept in that environment and at that time in their lives, just that they were at adolescence and the sort of that time period for them, that they were dangerous. Pardon me. And people were like really afraid to travel in these certain areas, and that they would be like extremely good shots with things like the sling or with bow and arrow and this sort of thing. And they would attack people on the roads and like take their stuff, and they were basically like just these wild, pardon me, children that would sort of, that were fairly independent. Now, there attached to that was this idea that they were supernatural because of the swiftness and because of the overwhelming sort of power of them and this sort of thing in a group. And the
hmm
same kind of concept when you're looking at the idea of the fear of these generations coming up. Like, what if they were to suddenly start displaying these sort of supernatural powers and, this sort of thing. So I think there's this fear of, I think that it is connected with this sort of, I don't know. I think it's really interesting. And it's just something about the whole concept of people being afraid of the generations that are coming up behind them in a way. There's something interesting about that. Like in that Arthur C. Clarke book, the whole concept is that there's an evolution of humanity occurring, and that's the final evolution, and the children come up and they're the final generation, so to speak, and they absorb all of the. Anyway, you'd have to just look at the synopsis of the book, but I think there could be something to that, you know. Like even the idea of leaving out milk or honey or things like that in a world like that in the distant past, it could have been more than just like maybe the fairy lore did have a lot to do with actually just these wild children. You know what
hmm
I mean? For that time period, it could be, or even that they were very tricky and I don't know. I think there's something to that, And then generations coming up, I think there's sort of a war going on sometimes between, or people feel some kind of tension about, their effect on the generation or how they're. Are we going to have? Is there going to be a kind of wait, like a moment, where I don't know. It's just strange, as far as the way that it being interpreted the way that it is. The idea of like maybe there is something supernatural to it, and there could be that, and that's a less, I guess, something we don't have to be invested in as a society. But at the same time, I think that trope in films is playing up to something in the psyche that is actually there for some people, but they are actually afraid. That's for some reason. I think it's even like with movies like Chucky and everything, where it was a doll. The concept of treating a child like it's not even a human being, or like it's just a doll or something, and how that could turn out badly. I mean, they could. I think that just this irresponsibility of how people have treated children, or that group that they don't accept the idea that they are going to eventually grow into an adult and remember, how you treated them and the effect that that could have. So I think that
Yeah.
that's really interesting sort of notion in itself that it could be at work in that way. So I don't
Yeah.
know, but
And you see that now. I mean, too, plenty of people now they have this idea of, and I think part of it is because of popular culture and all that. But that kids, even like not even necessarily kids anymore, but like people in their 20s or whatever, teens or 20s, they're tied. They're all tied to their electronics all the time. That's like this.
yeah,
I've heard this again and again. And as I always say, I know people that are in that age group that are not. They
sure,
take out their
yeah,
phone a couple times a day, maybe, or whatever. If they get a message from
yeah,
someone, not social media, but anyway. So there's this thing I've heard shows before where like it's supposed to be on the idea of the paranormal or any topic, but it devolves into this whole conversation about
bashing sort of,
basically,
yeah.
yeah, these kids today, that kind of thing. So
Yeah, yeah. I think that this is kind of the trope fits into that, you
yeah,
know?
yeah, it's sort of if we want to go that way, it's sort of um almost like a projection of uh revenge from the child
Yeah,
on the adults, sort of
yes.
uh becoming as dangerous as the people, or as bad or evil as the people somehow think that they are already,
Yeah.
uh
I
but
think
with,
that's kind of got something, yeah.
yeah,
I
um
mean, there is the other angle that's paranormal.
right,
Like there's there's something in the forest luring you out, but even in those old stories, I mean, it would be a good way for bandits or the things to like get people to come and check and then they don't see them again because, I mean, so it could be human interaction or there's the other hand that it could be supernatural interaction. So I don't know, but I think that even like the Lost Boys trope from Peter Pan, like Peter Pan has a whole there's a lot of stuff there going on, but the whole concept of um the Lost Boys and all of that. And then the vampire movie, The Lost Boys too, it's really interesting. But basically these sort of outcast, reject from society. And that starts in childhood too. I mean, there's sort of this sort of
yeah,
that trope exists for a reason. So it's really interesting, you know.
yeah, yeah. So going back to the paranormal side of things too, there are a couple of things, abilities or things that happen with encounters that I find also fascinating here. One thing I've already mentioned, sort of, is this idea that these black-eyed children or people seem to be able to teleport in a way, or vanish and reappear. Uh, so it says there here that I lost the spot. Uh, okay, here we go. Inexplicable disappearance. This is from a website called mythicalcreatures.info, and I don't have the article title here, but because I'm kind of scrolled down to the page here, but one of the things it talks about as far as their abilities or their things that happen in rare cases is where witnesses report the sudden and inexplicable disappearance or even reappearance. I've heard of that too, of black-eyed kids, uh, and sometimes vanishing and reappearing without approaching again. Other times, I've heard of them actually approaching second times in different locations. And even though they're locations where there's no way the black-eyed person could have walked that far, so that's also odd as well. Um, there's also an article here, and this is time is always fascinating to me as far as when it acts in weird ways, or it seems to be acting in weird ways. In rare accounts, people describe a strange distortion of time during these encounters. Some report a sense of time slowing down or becoming disoriented. Now, I do wonder if some of that is the sort of mental telepathic contact trying to influence the person, or if there is, doesn't really say that there's missing time. So I almost wonder if that's the case. But there's also shape shifting, which is something we've talked about recently in different shows. It's less common, but some people have and I've read about this too in few cases. Forms are a type of shapeshifting. Witnesses have described the sudden transformation of these entities into different forms. I'm guessing they mean creatures, or I think I've even heard of like animals as well. So yeah, this is a good article here as well. I'll include all these in the episode description. And so yeah, I did a search over on Reddit, like I said, for accounts here, and I found one, and it's a long one, so I'm not going to read the whole thing. But this this post here talks about this person when they were a kid. Their mom was driving them to school, and so they saw. Let's see here. Let me find my spot here. So when they saw these kids, they didn't see the black eyes at first, but they saw these kids. So it was this mom and the driving, and then this kid. Both saw these two children in blue and white private school uniforms standing side by side. That's unusual for black-eyed children in a way. But they were standing near the entrance of the neighborhood on the sidewalk. It was either two, so they don't know if it was boys or girls, but because it was years ago. But but they were wearing these uniforms, which is odd because the writer says at the time it was 40 degrees outside, so they would have been freezing. They looked like they were dressed for the summer, according to this post here, and they didn't have any coats on or anything. Also, there were two schools in the area, but not a private school until the next town over. And blue and white were not the school uniform colors. So this is just this writer here pointing out all these odd things. They were also not anywhere near where a bus stop was located. It was actually a few blocks away. So there were no streetlights and where they were standing as well. They were just standing in the dark. So they were in the corner on the right, closest to the passenger side of the vehicle, where of course the writer was sitting, and they were turning toward the figures in the vehicle. And as they got closer, the writer thought they didn't have faces because it was just too shadowy and dark out. But when the headlights hit these figures, they saw that there was black eyes, and so they got freaked out and because their eyes were all black, and the mom actually saw it too, and she just drove out of there real fast. So I'm guessing they must have already been giving off this sense of fear to the people that were there. And apparently the mom was so freaked out she didn't go back to back home from driving the kid to school until the sun was out completely. So yeah, it was. Let me see here. The writer says they thought they were ghosts, but a few months after that, the writer heard about black-eyed kids on YouTube or something. So here you have this situation where at the time the writer, if anyone wants to, believe or not believe, but according to the writer, they had no knowledge of black-eyed children at the point that they saw them. It wasn't until after um, they had the experience where they found out about this. So this is from a few years ago, but still, just that's relatively recently, and shows that these experiences still happen. So, but yeah, your thoughts on that one, Jen, as well.
I mean, I don't know. I was just thinking, like, you remember Firestarter too? I think it was Drew
Mm-hmm.
Barrymore, that movie, Stephen King also. That sort of concept, it reminds me of that. And it reminds me of poltergeist activity often being linked to typically adolescent girls, and that sort of that, well, and boys too. But I mean, basically, with that shift from childhood into adulthood, you see the poltergeist activity. Usually, they've started to kind of that they've seen that there's some kind of connection there. I just think it's interesting that it's unavoidable to not, I mean, even in the name. And then the idea of the eyes being the sort of windows to the soul, and people, perceiving these entities, I guess you would call them, being sort of like, I don't know, the idea that the eyes being black, that's standing out as being such an unusual. I just think something to the fear of children and the fear of that there's something involved with that. But there also could be the concept that, I mean, if an entity were choosing to use that sort of shape or presentation, it's I guess it would be not very useful actually, because I mean the people are already terrified of them. So that's really, I mean, I just missed that. It's almost like the Men in Black, or like the concept that they look human but not quite human, so they got something slightly wrong. So they could be
Right.
interdimensional beings, or they could be maybe even alien or something, but they're taking on this shape in particular in the shapes of children. Is a really, it's just interesting that if it is a shape-shifting entity, or if it is a sort of body snatcher thing, that's very interesting to choose that. I mean, I've heard of people reporting paranormal experiences where they think that they have a medium come in, and the person's been seeing a child in the house, and the medium is like, oh, it's not a child, it's actually a demon,
Mm-hmm.
and they're using the shape of a child to get you to let down your guard. So even so it's not like it's a completely alien idea, but at the same time, it's just so unsettling that um to create that sort of fear around it. I mean, I don't know. It's just strange is all, you know what I mean?
Oh
That's
yeah. Well,
interesting.
and with the alien aspect, the possibility of aliens, if you think about some reports of what some aliens look like, they supposedly have black eyes too. Some
Yeah.
people say those are
Well, there's
more,
the hybrid program. There's that
yeah,
whole hybrid program that's something to consider as well, which is interesting. I mean, they could literally be like, as far as taking it in a realistic perspective, maybe they're escaped from the, you know, hybrid facility. Or there's the whole clone movement, where people talk about that they are making clones that um, are complete, except that they don't have a soul. So they say, so that's an interesting angle on what it could also be. I mean, there's so many different things to think about it. It's just, we've been thinking about it, as a society for, I guess, since the 90s, which is really interesting timing, I think as a society or what.
yeah, definitely. Yep, and a lot of movies coming out at that time that were just. I mean, think of some of the movies. Of course, Beetlejuice came out late '80s. Men in Black, the movie, came out late '80s, early '90s. There's a lot of stuff coming out, fiction coming out, but some. I mean, obviously, Beetlejuice is about ghosts, and a really powerful one. That I remember, and Lydia called Beetlejuice a demon, even though he appeared to just be a ghost. Just that he'd been around for so long that he had learned how to do the things he was able to do. But yeah, so a lot of movies coming out around that time that were on all these subjects as well. So I have another account here of an experience, and I'll read this one, and we'll see what other ones we find. But this one, I'll read this one because this one seems pretty good. This one says, I don't know what to make of this. This is from a couple of years ago. Now, I've always been aware of the black-eyed children, just as cryptids or demons or whatever. I work at a gas station convenience store chain, and the other night I was doing my shift change at 2:47 a.m. As I was finishing, my door chime went off, so the door opened, causing me to look up, and the door was wide open and creeping shut. But beyond the door, on the other side of the gas pumps next to the air pump, I saw two kids, a boy and a girl. The boy had on normal clothes with like a black t-shirt, and the girl had on a white top half dress with the bottom being black. I noticed this and got confused. It's now 2:50 in the morning. So I finished counting the money, and they were still there, hadn't moved. Now I already felt like something was off. I was experiencing a bunch of anxiety, and my arm hairs were charged with static. I walked out front and I said, "Hey guys, what are you doing out here alone?" I received no response, which literally filled me with fear so bad. Then the girl, clearly year or two older than the boy, steps off the curb, and she extended her hand, and her brother took it and hopped off the curb, like playfully again. And so the person said, "Come inside where it's warm." And as I said that, my whole body shut down, and I was literally frozen, like I'd turned a corner to a bear. I'd never felt more fear in my entire life. There's not a long punctuation in this. I pulled myself literally by the door handle, feeling like a bag of rocks inside. And the second I was inside, the fear subsided. I ran behind the counter so fast. I sat there and watched them cross over to the next curb at 3:05 a.m. toward the building, but never saw them emerge again. And so there's more here. They say they have to get back to work again, and they're absolutely terrified because they invited them in. So, yeah, it's then now they're thinking about this a lot. So anyway, that's another account of this kind of experience that someone apparently they claimed they had. So, and that's the one where that's an odd one in that they were not directly approached by the black-eyed kids, but the black-eyed kids were just there. Almost like, you almost have to wonder, were they there to draw the person out? Or was it an accident? Were they just moving through, going to wherever else? Of course, it's impossible to know as the case of so many of these accounts. But I do wonder if the fact that they were invited, that it was them manipulating this person into doing that to the gas station. And gas stations themselves can be, there's so many anomalous stories about things happening at gas stations as well.
Sorry, they're setting off a lot of fireworks and the dog's barking, but I don't know if
No
you
problem.
can hear me. But I was going to
Yeah.
say, I think that kind of this. Hang on a minute.
Yeah, no problem. So, but yeah, this is a good topic, I think, to cover, and we have other topics we'll get to, but I
Yeah,
think this is
I definitely
important.
think I had to come inside for just a second because my
Yeah.
dog's barking at the fireworks. But I mean, I think that the fact that as a society, I think that there is this sort of trope going on. I think there's there could be a paranormal aspect to it as well, though. I mean, it's an urban cryptid, so we're seeing sort of this dawn of urban cryptid, which is really interesting. I mean, there are accounts perhaps in forest settings or where the old fears used to lie, but having an urban cryptid is essentially what these black-eyed children seem to be. Like, they show up in suburbs, they show up where people wouldn't expect to run into such things. But I think the aspect of um, this sort of era of children coming up with these sort of perhaps like even the idea of vengeful spirits of children, even like maybe even as ghost aspect or as a ghosts that have like a sort of physical. Because I think in childhood, it would be like even in sorry, I keep shifting around, but
No
even in
problem.
the concept of like a interview with the vampire, like Claudia the vampire, the Anne Rice series, they say that they never make a child into a vampire because then they're doomed to stay in that state for eternity or throughout their time as
Right.
they are existing in that state. It's kind of interesting. Just there's so many different angles to think about. I think it calls up a lot of subconscious aspects of the human psyche, the human adult psyche. And I just think it's really fascinating because, I mean, of course, we were all children once. And just, it's really interesting coming face to face with something and that being the personification of the terror or the fear when it's something that, needs us most of all, usually. And so I think that's just really interesting as a phenomenon among the supernatural entities, like even in the case of people thinking that they see. I mean, just the nature of the way that children act is so interesting. So I think that it's just sad that in our society, like I don't know, just anyway, I think it is a great topic and I enjoyed talking with you about it. And it's a huge sort of looks to me like a huge psychological, introspection going on in a way, but as far as the way
Yeah.
it could be perceived.
Yeah. So I have one more story I'll read here. This post I found, and after that we'll end it after that. But yeah, this is good. So this one says, uh, I was about 6, and I was on a field trip. I forget where. And when we arrived, we were at the hub area. I guess they mean bus or train station. Not sure. And they had a friend, and they were exploring the area and checking stuff out. They saw a kid in a wheelchair, uh, and then they let's see here. Uh, when they saw, okay, this is odd. So the when they were watching him. They saw that he had black eyes, and then he turned. So he looked at them and then turned back around, and after that, their memory of the whole story went blank. Basically, they don't remember where they went right after that. So that's kind of odd as well. I do wonder if they have abilities to manipulate minds, if they could also sort of make memories of the experiences also kind of fuzzy or hazy as well. Of course, time can do that as well. But so that's an odd one, and that's the thing with all these, and really with all things paranormal. You get these general themes or these general common uh, events or traits or details in so many of these experiences, but then you have so many that have this one little detail or two little details that are completely different from all the rest, and that's what makes it amazing to look into them. Um, so yeah, I think that's a good place to stop with that topic. But looking forward to us talking about orbs soon, and then also the idea of uh, government and or corporate uh, contact with uh, cryptids, creatures, and fairies or fae, and how all that looks and how all that works, and looking forward to researching that. So, Jen, you're
Yeah, that'll
welcome
be
to.
fun.
Yeah, I was gonna say you're welcome to step back in here and give your closing thoughts as you like.
Oh, I think that the fear of children and the power of the psychic energy that's filtered in a way, I think that's playing a role in it. As far as like, there could be a whole trope of, I keep saying trope because I haven't seen or encountered these, and then the stories of black-eyed children have faded away in recent. I haven't heard a lot of recent accounts as much as it was like really prolific in the 90s and the 2000s in the storytelling. it's like there was like a generation that came up where these were existing in our reality, and they were taking up that kind of personification. So I think that's really interesting. But I think that even the old classic idea of being afraid of children, or that they should be something that needs, maybe, there's something going on with the way that people are interacting with these upcoming generations. And I think that they've had a fear of upcoming generations for a while now, where they feel like they're losing control of that in a way, or there's a possibility that there's something strange happening with the kids, or something like that. So I think that's really odd, just that whole concept. But no, I think we covered it as much as we can, as far as what do you make of it? Because there are quite a few stories. There's not a ton, and they haven't made it to the point where they've reached the level of, say, like witches or vampires, as far as, or werewolves. But it's still enough to have that needs to be talked about. And I think there's plenty more to talk about. I also am looking forward to talking about orgs, or whatever else that we should talk about next Saturday. And thanks for having me.
Oh, no problem. Thank you for being here as always. And for everyone else that's here listening to this live, stick around if you'd like, because I'll be doing our weekly trick or treat call-in show after this. So everyone, thank you for being here, and special thanks to Jen. And we will talk to you all next time on Salsido Paranormal. Take care.